They found my car at the edge of Lake Monroe at 2 in the morning. My badge was on the seat. My phone was in the water. And my husband was at home, sleeping with her. The police department declared me missing. A search team combed the woods for 3 days. My face was on the news. My mother was crying on television, begging for someone, anyone, to come forward with information. But I wasn't missing. I was watching. Every single moment, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the truth that I already knew in my bones to finally show itself on camera. My name is Detective Keisha Monroe. I am, or was, a decorated officer with 12 years on the force. And what I discovered in those silent weeks I disappeared changed everything. Before I tell you what I found, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button. And I mean right now, because this story is going to move you. Give this video a like if you believe a woman has every right to protect herself by any means necessary. And in the comments below, I want to hear from you. If you suspected your partner was cheating and you had the skills and resources of a trained detective, would you use them? Or would you walk away without knowing? Tell me below, and stay with me, because what Keisha found, nobody saw coming. I want you to picture something for me. A woman in a dark blue uniform, a gold badge catching the fluorescent light of a precinct hallway, a pair of dark eyes that see everything, the body language of a suspect, the tremble in a witness's voice, the lie a person tells with their hands, even while their mouth says something else entirely. That woman is Keisha Monroe, Detective First Grade, Midtown Precinct, age 35, 12 years on the force, commendation for bravery in 2018, the kind of cop who solves cases that other cops quietly give up on. And yet, the case that would define her entire life, the betrayal that would shake her to her very foundation, was happening right under her roof, right under her nose, from the one person she had trusted completely. This is her story, in her own words, and I want you to understand something before we go any further. Keisha did not come to me with a story of victimhood. She came to me with a story of survival, of strategy, of a woman who took everything she had ever been trained to do and turned it on the most personal investigation of her life. So, settle in, because this one is going to stay with you. Keisha grew up in South Atlanta, fourth of 5 children. Her father was a corrections officer, a quiet, steady man who believed in 2 things, the law and his family, in equal measure. Her mother was a school teacher who once drove 40 minutes out of her way to return $12 to a cashier who'd given her too much change. I was raised by people who believed honesty was the only currency that mattered, Keisha told me. Not money, not status, honesty. She joined the academy at 23 after getting her criminal justice degree from Clark Atlanta University. She was excellent from the beginning, top of her class in field tactics, psychological profiling, and forensic interview technique. Her captain once told her she could read a crime scene the way most people read a book. She met Marcus in her second year on the job. He was a defense attorney, sharp, charming, the kind of man who walked into a room and immediately owned it. They dated for 3 years before he proposed. Their wedding was a Saturday in October with 200 guests, a live band, and a reception that went until 2 in the morning. He was my best friend, she says. And the way she says it, past tense, flat, exhausted, tells you everything. For the first 6 years, the marriage was good, really good. They bought a house in Decatur, she got her detective shield, he made partner at his firm. They talked about children. They traveled. Cancun, London, Cape Town. They had the kind of life that looked perfect on paper. And for a long time, it was. Until it wasn't. Keisha is trained to notice things. It is literally her job. And the things she started noticing about Marcus in year 7 of their marriage were small, individually insignificant. But a detective doesn't look at things individually. A detective looks at patterns. The late nights started first. Marcus had always worked long hours, that was nothing new, but these were different. Before, he'd call when he was stuck in the office. Now he just didn't come home. No call, texts that said running late with no further explanation. Then she noticed the phone. He'd always been casual about it, leaving it on the kitchen counter, charging it on the nightstand where she could see it. Now it went everywhere with him, even to the bathroom, even to the garage when he was taking out trash. She noticed he'd changed his passcode. She had accidentally seen him unlock it once years ago and never thought anything of it. Now it was longer. She noticed a new cologne. Subtle. Something clean and expensive that she hadn't bought him and hadn't smelled in their house before. She noticed he'd started going to the gym early on Saturday mornings. Marcus had never been a gym person. He'd complained about the gym their entire marriage. None of these things alone meant anything. Together, they told a story she didn't want to read. I didn't want to be right, she told me. For the first time in my career, I was praying that my instincts were wrong, that I was seeing patterns that weren't there, that I was just overworked and paranoid. She pauses. I wasn't overworked. She started doing what she knew how to do. She wrote things down. Timestamps, details, behavioral deviations. She checked the credit card statements, and there it was. A restaurant she'd never heard of, twice on nights he said he was working late. A hotel in Midtown, charged on a card she didn't know existed. She found that one by accident when she was doing their taxes. That was the moment I stopped hoping I was wrong, she says. She confronted him. This was 5 months before everything fell apart. She sat down at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening with the credit card statements spread out in front of her, the hotel, the restaurant, the cash withdrawals she couldn't account for, and she asked him calmly and directly to explain. He denied it. He was good at it, she gives him that. He didn't get angry, which would have been a red flag. He didn't get defensive in the obvious way. He looked her in the eyes and he said with complete composure that the hotel charge was a client event that he'd had to book on his personal card because the firm card was being disputed, that the restaurant was a dinner with a potential client, that the cash was for a poker game with guys from the office. He was so calm, so detailed, and I thought, this is how he wins cases. This is what he does to juries. She swallows. And it almost worked on me. Almost. Because the next morning, she checked the hotel's website. The client event he mentioned was a fundraiser that had been canceled due to weather. She called the hotel directly, not as a wife, but as a detective, and confirmed the room had been booked under his name. Single occupancy for 1 night. No client event, no business dinner. A lie so complete and so detailed that it had clearly been prepared in advance. She says she sat in her car in the precinct parking lot for 20 minutes after she got off the phone. Not crying, just processing. I've sat across from murderers, she tells me. I've looked into the eyes of people who had done the most horrible things you can imagine and watched them lie to my face. I always knew. I always knew. She pauses. And I sat there in that car and I thought, I have been sharing a bed with a liar for I don't know how long, and he's so good at it that for one moment, he almost fooled me. She wasn't angry yet. She was deciding. The breakdown didn't come in the way you would expect from most people. Keisha didn't scream, she didn't throw things, she didn't call her friends at 2 in the morning and sob into the phone. She sat with it, the way a detective sits with an unsolved case, quiet and alone in the dark, turning the evidence over and over in her mind. The grief was immense, she says, because it wasn't just about him, it was about the version of my life I had believed in, the future I had planned, the person I had trusted with my whole self. There was one night, she tells me this quietly, with considerable vulnerability, that she sat on the bathroom floor of their home at 3 in the morning and just wept. Not from anger, from loss, from the peculiar grief of mourning someone who was still alive, someone who, at that very moment, was asleep in their bed 30 feet away. I grieved the man I married, she says, because whoever that man sleeping in there was, he wasn't him. But Keisha Monroe is not a woman who stays on the bathroom floor. By morning, the grief had transmuted into something else, something harder and colder and considerably more focused. She made a decision. She wasn't going to confront him yet, not with everything she needed. She was going to do what she did best. She was going to build a case. Here is where the story takes the turn that nobody, not Marcus, not his girlfriend, not even Keisha's own colleagues saw coming. She planned it for 3 weeks. She requested time off from the department, personal days she'd saved for years and never used. She arranged for her car to be found at Lake Monroe at 2 in the morning, with her badge on the seat and her phone in the shallow water. She made it look like she had vanished. She did this with surgical precision. She left nothing incriminating, nothing that would suggest foul play on anyone else's part, because she didn't want Marcus investigated. She wanted him watched. She planted just enough ambiguity to trigger a missing persons investigation, just enough to ensure that every move Marcus made in the following days would be under a microscope he didn't know existed. Because here's what Keisha understood that the average person wouldn't. When someone goes missing, the people closest to them are observed. Their behavior is logged. Their phone records are requested. And in the first 48 hours of a missing persons case, people show you exactly who they are, because either they haven't prepared to be watched or they're too rattled to maintain their performance. She moved into a rental unit she'd booked under a friend's name. She had surveillance equipment she knew how to use. She watched her own disappearance unfold on the news, watched Marcus stand in front of television cameras with red eyes and a trembling chin, begging for information about his beloved wife. And then she watched what he did when the cameras went away. The woman's name was Danielle Vasquez. She was a paralegal at his firm, 28 years old. And within 48 hours of Keisha's disappearance, Danielle Vasquez was in Keisha's house. Not just for a visit. She came with a suitcase. Keisha had set up a camera in the living room, disguised as a decorative item, the kind of placement any experienced surveillance officer would know to use. She watched from a screen in her rental unit as Danielle made coffee in her kitchen, sat on her couch, answered Marcus's phone when it rang. I watched her answer my husband's phone sitting on my couch in my house while the city was searching for me, Keisha says. Her voice is very still when she says it. And I thought, how long? How long has this been happening? The answer, it turned out, was 2 years. But that wasn't the worst revelation. The worst revelation came on day 6. Keisha had maintained contact with a trusted colleague, a fellow detective she'd known for a decade, who knew she was alive and who she had quietly asked to keep an eye on the investigation. Through this colleague, she learned that Marcus had by day 6 hired a private attorney. Not a divorce attorney, a criminal defense attorney. He was preparing to be a suspect in his wife's disappearance. That told me everything, she says. An innocent man whose wife is missing calls a grief counselor. He doesn't call a criminal defense attorney 6 days in. But there was one more thing, one final, devastating layer. The financial records her colleague quietly surfaced showed that Marcus had, approximately 4 months prior, increased the life insurance policy on Keisha Monroe to $1.4 million. He had increased it 4 months ago, in secret. I was sitting in that rental unit looking at that number on my phone screen, Keisha says, and I understood that I had not left my house a moment too soon. Keisha went to her lieutenant on day 18. She walked into the precinct, alive, composed, in civilian clothes, and she placed a sealed folder on his desk containing everything she had gathered over the previous weeks. Surveillance footage, financial documents, hotel records, screenshots, the life insurance policy change, phone records her colleague had preserved through proper channels, and a 7-page written account of everything she had witnessed and documented. The lieutenant looked at the folder. He looked at her. He didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Then he said, "You're going to cause me a lot of paperwork, Monroe." And then he opened the folder and started reading. Marcus was brought in for questioning that afternoon. His attorney, the criminal defense attorney he had hired on day 6, was with him. But the thing about being questioned when your wife is the interviewing detective and has been surveilling you for 3 weeks is that the walls close in very fast. He hadn't committed murder. His wife was alive, sitting 15 feet away on the other side of a two-way mirror while a colleague conducted the interview. But what was uncovered in the investigation that followed went considerably beyond adultery. The financial investigation that opened in the weeks that followed found that Marcus had been embezzling from client accounts at his firm over a period of 18 months. The total amount was north of $380,000. Danielle Vasquez, it emerged, had been helping him conceal the transactions. The life insurance policy increase? His attorney argued it was coincidental. The jury, when the financial fraud case came to trial 8 months later, was not convinced by the argument of coincidence. Keisha testified. She sat in the witness box in a suit, and she told the court in precise and measured detail exactly what she had observed, when she had observed it, and how. The defense attorney, Marcus's second attorney, not the firm one who had removed himself from the case with considerable haste, tried to paint her methodology as reckless and self-serving. She looked at him calmly from the witness stand and said, "Every piece of evidence I gathered was reviewed for admissibility before I walked into this courtroom. I'm a detective. This is what I do." The jury was out for less than 4 hours. Marcus was convicted on 6 counts of financial fraud, 2 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. The firm settled out of court with the clients whose accounts had been drained. Their settlement was confidential, but sources familiar with the case indicated it was significant. Danielle Vasquez cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. She received 2 years probation and was barred from working in any legal capacity in the state of Georgia. Keisha filed for divorce on the day of sentencing. She walked out of the courthouse in the same suit she'd gone to testify, removed her wedding ring in the parking lot, and put it in her jacket pocket. She went back to work the following Monday. She says, "There was some internal review of my conduct, obviously. I staged my own disappearance, which, as you can imagine, is not standard departmental procedure." She pauses. "They reviewed everything. They talked to my lieutenant, my colleague, the attorneys, and ultimately they determined that I had not misused any departmental resources or violated any law. My personal leave was documented and approved. The surveillance equipment I used was personal property." She was cleared. She was promoted to detective sergeant the following year. I asked Keisha, near the end of our conversation, whether she regretted any of it, whether there was a part of her that wished she had done things differently, walked out the door the normal way, hired a private investigator, confronted him again and demanded the truth. She was quiet for a moment. If I had walked out the door the normal way, she said, the embezzlement continues. Those clients never get their money back. And a man who had taken out $1.4 million on my life, who was hiding assets, hiding a relationship, building what looked like an exit strategy, that man walks free. She looked down at her hands. So, no, I don't regret it. But then she said something I didn't expect, something quieter and more personal than anything that had come before. What I grieve, she said, is the decade. The decade I gave him, the trust I gave him, the version of the future I had planned with that man. That's what you don't get back. She pauses. Not the marriage, not the house, the version of yourself that believed the person you loved was exactly who they said they were. She smiles. It is a real smile, worn and honest and hard-won. But you know what else you get to keep? Everything after. All the days after. And I'm keeping every one of them. Keisha Monroe is 37. She runs a nonprofit that provides legal advocacy resources for women navigating divorce and domestic financial abuse. She has a dog named Prospect and a house she bought by herself and a garden she says she has absolutely no idea how to maintain. She says she's happy. I believe her.